Hi, I'm Dr. Rachel Douchant, Director of the Liberty and Ethics Center here at Lindenwood University. And I'm really happy to be here with my friend Paul Patterson from Restore St. Louis. Thanks for joining us, Paul.
Very welcome.
And I brought you in because I have worked with you in order to do some things with the students, but I really want to talk to you about an event that we're going to be having next fall on the topic of toxic charity. And so I wanted to ask you about that because you're in the trenches doing work in our inner cities and with our immigrant populations and so forth, right?
Exactly, yes.
Yeah. So first of all, tell me how the approach of the groups that you work with Restore St. Louis is different from what we might normally think of when we think of charity.
All right, so first let me tell you a little bit about what we do. So I'm with an organization called Restore St. Louis, and we are actually the community outreach organization of one individual church, New City Fellowship Church. We worship in University City. Our office is located in the West End neighborhood. Now the West End neighborhood is the neighborhood in North St. Louis. For those of you who know St. Louis, it's just east of Skinker, north of Delmar, south of, say, Martin Luther King Avenue. And it's a neighborhood that has struggled for decades with poverty, with drug violence, gangs, prostitution, all the sort of stuff that comes along with poverty. And Restore St. Louis it's a collection of programs that reach out to try to meet needs within that community. I work for one of those programs. We call it the Workday, and we bring volunteers like students in from universities, from high schools, but also adult volunteers. We bring them into that community, mostly to work in the homes of the elderly and of widows, but we also work to a great extent with immigrants and refugees who live there in the community. But then there's a lot of other types of work that we do, and probably one of the more significant efforts is a ministry that we call Harambe, and Harambe is a job program for youth. And so it's not just job training, but it's actually giving jobs to youth. And
so they're paid?
They are paid. And so we bring in 80 high school students really junior high and high school, age 12 through 18. We bring them in throughout the summer to work full-time. And then there's even an after-school program for 30 of them where they work every day after school during the school year. Okay. And what that program does is we pay them money to tuck point. If you drive around St. Louis, the city of St. Louis, it doesn't take too long before you start to notice that everything is brick. Right. And the mortar in between the bricks really needs to be replaced, taken out, new mortar put back in about every 50 years. Okay. And of course, you drive around those streets and you're looking at homes that were built 1900, 1910, 1920 and have never been tuck pointed. Right. Those homes will actually start to fall down. Literally, the walls will fall down for lack of tuck pointing. And so what we do is we hire these youth to do that work. They do about 25 to 30 homes a year. They're meeting a huge need. They do the work for free. Again, mostly for elderly, widows. It's a tuck pointing job on an individual home can run upwards of $20,000.
So if they do the work for free, how are they paid?
We receive a lot of donations, but then there's also block grants and different. There's government money that also helps to fund the program.
It's in the city's interest to have these houses not fall down, right?
Right, and it's in their interest to keep these seniors in their homes. Yeah, because in many cases, and these are the folks that I mostly work with the Workday ministry. These seniors are they're anchors, they're pillars in their community. Right. we want to keep them in their houses as long as possible, just because of the value that they bring to the community. You don't want them. You don't want to lose them prematurely just because they can't maintain their home.
Their presence has a stabilizing effect.
Absolutely.
And, absolutely. I'm sure morally and in the community. So, when I picture an inner city youth or whatever people think of when they have that phrase in their mind, it's hard to imagine that working, a program like that working. What are some of the difficulties you run into, and how do you overcome them?
Well, one of the amazing things about the program is, these are the very kids who these seniors would probably under normal circumstances be afraid of.
Yeah.
And yet here they are working on their home.
Right.
And so it really helps to bring, I think, some cohesion to the community as you see, folks who normally might be wary of one another actually
appreciating
sort of
one
each
another.
other. So it's really good. Some of the challenges, of course, these are kids that come from, it's a tough environment due to, decades of community breakdown and social problems.
Absolutely.
And so, they haven't grown up in a home where they've seen an adult going off to work every day. In some cases they have. In other cases they really haven't seen that.
Right. Or maybe their mom, if she's working 2 or 3 jobs, she can't be there to say, okay, it's homework time, sit down.
Maybe they don't see mom much at all.
Yeah, exactly. To train them how to have.
Because she's putting food on the table.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's hard for, you have the normal type of issues with, and they're kids, of course.
Sure.
So with any kids, you're gonna struggle with not showing up for work and not wanting to work hard and just sort of checking out for the day, and you see all of that. And so one of the challenges is just instilling in them. I think instilling in them the notion that this is going to pay off.
Yeah.
That you work hard. Yeah, you're going to make some money, but in the long run, this is actually going to pay off for you.
You're having longer term vision for their lives.
Right, because I think what you have are youth. All the systems have failed them at this point. School system has failed them. Neighborhood systems have failed, and they've really grown, I think, to expect that I can work hard, but it's not really going to get me anywhere.
Yeah,
and so
jaded.
Sure.
Yeah.
So just convincing them, hey, this is actually going to pay off, and you're gonna have a skill that then you can use that as leverage for getting jobs down the road, or even this is something that's going to look good on a college application, and actually leverage this into something bigger and better down the road. Actually looking to the future, planning for really the whole idea that you have a future.
Yeah.
Which so many of the social pressures in the community would tell these kids. Don't bother about the future.
Right.
Live for today.
Right.
It's all that you've got. So
how genuinely successful has the program been?
It's been amazing. We have seen lots of young people, and I don't have statistics or anything.
Sure.
But lots of young people go to college. Many of these youth have gone on to work in the construction industry.
Yeah.
In fact, I was at Home Depot shopping for light bulbs the other day, and I get tapped on the back by a young man who had been in Harambe.
Yeah.
He had been in the program, and he said, "Hey, how are you doing? What are you up to?" And we got to talking, and he was there to buy materials for a job that he was doing on a construction site.
That's great.
And so you
That's
actually
exciting.
have seen young people really embracing work as a way of thinking about their future.
Yeah.
And it's been and then not to mention the value that it brings to the community, as we've seen over the years. 25 to 30 homes every year, being tuck pointed, and this has gone on for Oh goodness, at least 12 or 13 years now.
Wow.
And so
part of what I've noticed when I've worked with New City Fellowship, I have experience with that church, I have experience with the City Lights program, Restore St. Louis program, and something I've noticed is the engagement, that everyone is engaged with the community. It's not, I guess, what we're used to, which is more maybe a spring break missions trip, to go down to Arkansas or something, and we're going to paint some houses or something like that, right? And then we just kind of fly in, and then we float out,
Right.
And maybe a lot of privileged suburban, white kids coming in. And does it really give them a sense of what that life is like? No. Is it really affecting their perspective on the world? No. And yet, when I've worked with you all, I've noticed they're living together, they're working together, the relationships seem more long-term. We only have a few minutes in this session, but just tell me a little bit about the underlying philosophy of the approach that Restore St. Louis takes.
Right, so you can really wrap it up in one word, and that word is incarnational.
Okay.
And so, looking at the theology of the church, which uses that word incarnation to describe the person of Jesus Christ. That in the person of Jesus, God has come in the flesh. That God is incarnated in the person of Jesus. And what we like to say at New City is that the church today then is the incarnation of Jesus, that we incarnate him. And so incarnation, as far as, the way we understand it, it means actually having a faithful presence among the folks with whom you're working, faithful presence among your neighbors.
Right.
And so we have, many of the members of the church have moved into the neighborhood.
Okay, so I'd like to hear more about that after our break. Join us when we come back.
A full life measured in seats starts with the right ones early on. Car crashes are a leading killer of children 1 to 13. Learn how to prevent deaths and injuries by using the right car seat for your child's age and size.
A boy born in Joplin, Missouri was fascinated by anything with wheels and a motor. The odds of him going on to fascinate millions with his talent? 1 in 260,000. The odds of this born racer having 157 career top 10 finishes in NASCAR? 1 in 125 billion. The odds of him winning both the Daytona 500 and the Brickyard 400 in the same year? 1 in 195 million. The odds of a child being diagnosed with autism? 1 in 68. I'm NASCAR driver Jamie McMurray, and my niece has autism. Learn more at autismspeaks.org/signs.
Get out to the forest.
Let the kids connect to their roots. It's gonna be so much fun. Yeah! Woo-hoo!
Hey guys, wait up!
And discover the wonders of nature with your family.
These trees are the key to our way of life.
Fresh air.
What a glorious morning!
Clean water.
Woohoo! This is great!
An endless forest adventure.
Let's rock this jungle! Yo, this is untapped territory.
How amazing!
Visit discovertheforest.org to find a forest near you.
Hi, I'm Dr. Rachel Douchant. Welcome back to The Free Exchange, hosted this week by the Liberty and Ethics Center here at Lindenwood University. And I'm back with my guest, Paul Patterson from Restore St. Louis. And I really was fascinated by what you were saying before the break about the incarnational concept, that where instead of maybe sort of the soup kitchen approach or the food pantry approach, you all want to be enfleshed. You want to be a presence in the community that's always there. So tell me more about how that's different from as I said before, kind of our usual notions of how we do charity.
Right. So, I think that, middle class folks, upper class folks, when they see a problem, I think our reaction is throw money at it,
Right.
and it'll get better.
And we want a quick fix.
And we
Yeah.
and we want to fix now, and we we want a program. We want to say, you do this, 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 and this, and then you're
Right.
which we didn't get to where we are overnight, and the
Right.
solutions aren't going to come overnight either. And so when you think about folks who are in trouble, when you think about problems in a community, you can really think about them in three different ways. There are folks who need relief. So say there's a tornado or a hurricane or something on those lines. In that case, what you really need is to get money into the situation quickly.
It's an emergency.
It's an emergency.
Yeah.
You got to get food, clothing, money,
Right.
resources. Boom. This is an emergency. It's a disaster. We got to, and that's where that sort of mentality of quickly let's get A, B, C. Let's put together a program and let's get that money, those clothes, those food into the situation right away.
Right.
Makes sense. But then, once you sort of establish that, then you got to start rebuilding. I mean, you can't just keep sending food and clothing. I mean, these buildings have been knocked down by the tornado. We got to rebuild. So you get into development phase, which is different than the
We experienced this in Joplin. Right,
Absolutely.
where the money comes pouring in, and then after everyone moves on to the next big tragedy,
our buildings are still
we still need trees and
right. And so you have development, you have recovery, which is really let's get back to where we were, but then going beyond recovery, there's what we call development, where you want to go beyond just recovering and continue to grow, continue to build on what you had. And I think what happens is when Americans sort of look at the inner city, a place like where we work, I think we tend to bring a relief approach.
to really a chronic problem.
To where we really need development.
Right.
What needs to be happening is development. What we tend to do is we follow an approach that sees the problem as one of crisis, of disaster.
Yeah.
And honestly, the poor themselves will often describe their situation as one of crisis or one of disaster. So when you meet a person, say, begging, they're always going to describe their situation to you as, it's a crisis. It's I need help right now.
Right.
When in actuality, what's probably really going on is not really a crisis, a disaster, but a long-term, problem that's in need of more than just, a buck or two or three, but it really what is needed is development.
The metaphor that strikes me is sort of the symptoms and the disease. Is that a helpful way of approaching it? I mean, in other words, we want to sort of fix the symptoms,
right?
But that's a chronic situation. You need to get down to the root,
right?
The root
and
issues.
So the symptom is, folks are struggling with having enough money to pay for, their basic needs.
Yeah.
And so we think that the solution then is, okay, well, let's get some money in there so we can meet these needs. But in reality, that symptom of not having enough money is indicative of deeper root problems.
Right.
And those problems, and again, looking to the Bible and thinking theologically about it. The way we would describe those problems is that there is broken relationship. We look to the very first chapters of Genesis where we have creation, and God puts the man and the woman in the garden, and everything is good, He's put them there to be in relationship with Him and with one another and with the land. And all those relationships are harmonious, and they are good. And then we see the humans rebelling against God, and as a result of that rebellion, there's broken relationship now, broken relationship with God, broken relationship with one another, broken relationship with the earth itself. And
so let me challenge you for a minute, though.
Yeah.
What you're describing is the Christian view of all human beings. So what is particular to the situation with poverty-stricken groups, right? Particularly with our inner cities. Where do you lay the?
Right.
I don't say blame, but
no, that's right. That's right.
How do you explain the differences there? Because of course there's brokenness everywhere you go, but it's manifesting itself in this very.
So those broken relationships, all humans share that.
Right.
And so it manifests itself, I'd say for everyone, but for the wealthy or the middle class, it manifests itself differently than it does for the poor.
Yeah. Do you assign any of the blame to past policies or anything like that? And if so, can you tell me a little bit about that? Particularly on the ground, I mean, how you're experiencing it with people who are engaging with these policies.
Yeah, I think that it's all, it's all connected. And so the brokenness that we see in the inner city, I don't think can be divorced from the affluence of the suburbs. In a place like St. Louis, what we saw over the course of decades were policies designed to separate people, policies designed to separate black from white. And you can look at school systems, you can look at neighborhood business, bank lending practices.
Sure.
You can look at all sorts of different structures where people were really separated, black from white, but then also really rich from poor.
Right.
At one time, rich and poor lived in somewhat proximity to one another, and today that's not so much the case. And I think as we grew more and more separate, as we continue to grow more and more separate from one another, we see these problems intensifying.
And Bob Lupton made this point in a talk I heard him give on his book, Toxic Charity, where he said, one of the most valuable resources is a network.
Yeah.
And a network of people who are diverse, right? And so if everyone is sort of ghettoized away from each other, then you're stuck in some sense and with the people you're with, and you can't get into, maybe you can't break into certain markets, or you can't, or maybe even certain ways of life don't even appear on your radar screen because you've just simply never been around it.
And a great example of that is church.
Yeah.
One of our primary, in America today, one of the primary places we go for those networks is church. And so if you need say you're a high school kid, getting back to the example of Harambe, high school student, need a summer job, where are you going to go? Well, maybe family, but quite possibly you're going to look at your church network to find someone in your church who has a business where they can hire you to work for the summer, and even then when it comes to, I think, going to college or who you're going to marry, all those different, different decisions. Church in America plays a really important role in sort of providing to you the network of people that you're going to go to. Well, you look at our churches today, and they are extremely segregated. 90+% of the churches in America are composed of 90% people of the same race. And I think that can even be said for class. I think our churches also are largely segregated based on not only race, but then also class.
So people feel naturally comfortable around people who are like themselves.
Of course.
How do you overcome this?
I think we have to I think we have to get to a point where we really feel that we need each other. I think we've gotten to a point where we don't feel that we need each other.
Okay.
I think African Americans have gotten to a point where they don't really feel like they need whites. We'll just do this on our own.
Yeah.
And I think the same thing really goes for rich, middle class, poor. I think we've gotten to a place where we don't feel like we really need each other. And what we've found as a church, as an organization, living, working in the community where we serve in North St. Louis, what we've discovered is the ways that we all benefit from being together. That it's obviously for the widow making $600 a month on Social Security who just got her home tuck pointed. Obviously, there's a benefit to her.
Yeah, but what's the benefit?
What we're finding is that there's huge benefits for us.
Right.
Living in the community.
That strikes me as the biggest contrast between the two modes of doing charity, right? Because the one is, I'll come in as a savior and sacrifice something for you in a way that doesn't particularly engage with you. And the other one is, I need you.
And that's where it gets back to what I was saying earlier about the root causes of poverty are those broken relationships. And I said it manifests itself differently for the poor than for the middle class. Well, for the middle class and the wealthy, the way those broken relationships, the way that manifests itself symptomatically, is with what you might call a God complex. We've been told that we can sort of pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps. That you can do it on your own. That you're completely self-sufficient. And we've come to believe that. It's sort of the myth of, I think, the American dream is that you can do this on your own, and we've bought into that. And so when we look at the problems of the poor of the inner city, we sort of take that mentality and say, I'll fix you.
Yeah.
I fixed myself. I'll fix you.
Yeah.
And so you might call it a God complex where we come to think that we're sort of masters of our own destiny and we can do all this without any help. And what happens, I think, when we come into a neighborhood like the one where we live and serve, is that notion gets knocked down pretty quick. We begin to discover that I don't have all the answers, that these problems are huge, and that I can't there's no quick fix.
I wish we could talk more, but we've got to wrap up. But that is such a fascinating point and gives us a lot to think about. Thank you so much for joining us today for the free exchange with the Liberty and Ethics Center. I really enjoyed talking to you, Paul. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rachel.